Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Pearly Health Center of Excellence webinar series. My name is Atul Jaiswal, and I'm the research lead at the Pearly Health Center of Excellence in Frailty-Informed Care. Pearly Health is a unique and innovative campus of care, home to more than 600 seniors and veterans living in independent apartments or receiving long-term care. Pearly Health is also a center for research, education, and clinical and therapeutic services. Pearly Health Center of Excellence leads and participates in innovative initiatives, research, and knowledge transmission activities that help advance quality of care for older adults living with frailty. Before I introduce our speaker for today, I want to let people know that there will be a time at the end of the presentation for questions, and you can do so by writing them in the Q&A question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to enter your question at any point of time. Please also note that today's webinar will be recorded. You will be able to access this recording as well as past webinars on the Center of Excellence webpage. When the recording is available, we'll share the link with all attendees so that you can revisit the webinar at any point of time. We also ask that you take a minute or two at the end to complete the short survey that will appear on your screen when you exit the webinar. So we are very fortunate to host Dr. Lisa Sheehy for our webinar today on the topic of potential of virtual reality to enhance quality of life, envisioning the future. Dr. Lisa Sheehy is an investigator at Breer's Health Research Institute since 2014. She worked as a physiotherapist in acute care, continuing care, and community settings before earning her PhD in 2013. Her research focuses on using technologies such as virtual reality, activity tracker, tele-rehab, and smart home devices to support rehabilitation, aging in place, and quality of life, especially for people with stroke, dementia, and those in long-term and complex care. She's also interested in intersection of arts and technology to enhance well-being. Without further ado, please welcome Dr. Lisa Sheehy. Over to you.
Thank you, Atul. I'm happy to be here. I was excited to be asked by Pearly Health to do one of their Center of Excellence talks. And this is one topic that's kind of dear to my heart, which is the use of virtual reality to enhance quality of life and for rehabilitation for people with stroke and other conditions. So these are the objectives that were mentioned in the advertisements for this seminar. So what I would like you to get out of the next 40 minutes or so is to learn about different forms of virtual reality, to understand how VR can impact the lives of people living in the community, people in hospital, and residents of long-term care, and consider for yourself about how using VR might be used in your, I put work situation, but it could be in your personal life or the life of your loved ones. I will start by explaining kind of a little bit general about VR, and then I'm going to go into some of the projects I've worked on, which will be examples of how VR can be used in these different situations. So just kind of for a little bit of background on VR. There's different types of VR. So I'm going to first talk about immersive and then some other different types. VR is everywhere. Like it's used for a lot of things that you may not know at first. So the typical virtual reality headset, which the woman with the scrubs on is wearing, is in Meta Quest 2. That's a common one, but there's lots of other ones. There's ones made by Google. There's all different types. A kind of a stereotypical example of a game that would be used with VR is the Beat Saber, which is the guy with kind of has lightsabers, and he plays it by virtually hitting the little red and blue tabs with the virtual lightsabers, and that makes you kind of dance as you listen to music because it's to the beat of music. Super fun, lots of activity. And very active. You can also use virtual reality to experience places you wouldn't normally go. So nature, travel, you can go to an opera, you can experience these all in this immersion where if you look around, you can actually see, like it would be like in real life. So you can look around and see different parts of your immersion. One interesting area that VR is used for is training healthcare professionals and others. So the woman in the scrubs, she's being trained on how to respond to a code white, which is somebody who's being aggressive within a hospital environment. So she's learning how to work with this virtual patient, but in this immersive reality. Another type of immersive virtual reality is the one on the left, which is called a Karen. We have a couple of these in Ottawa. One is at the Rehab Center. There's one at the University of Ottawa. And these are immersive, but instead of using a headset, you use a 180-degree screen. And then the person here standing on the treadmill can physically walk, and then interact with the screen. And they're using this a lot for PTSD at the rehab center, and they use it for different types of rehab. The person you can see is kind of strapped into a harness so that if they should stumble within this reality, then they won't fall. The picture on the right is of a system where this is used for a person with dementia. And the little blue, the things highlighted in blue are images from this person's life that have been uploaded into the system. So this person can interact with these photographs and use it to stimulate reminiscence. So another type of virtual reality, immersive virtual reality, but it's kind of a little bit different, is augmented reality. And this is where you can actually, with the headset, you can actually see your real surroundings, and then imposed upon that is a virtual component. So a couple of examples, the gentleman in the bottom left, he's using virtual reality for training on how to work in a factory or on a line. So he's you can see like some instructions, and then it's showing him how to insert some cables to do the wiring for this door of this truck. And so he uses those instructions and the virtual pathway presented in the augmented reality so that he can do the task and then learn it that way. The picture on the right is to be used for somebody with cognitive impairment to remind them the steps to do a task. So in this case, apparently in German, it says something about you put the hot water in the boiling water in the cup. So the real tea kettle and cup are kind of in the foreground, and then the red tea kettle and the smaller white cup are virtual, superimposed upon the reality. And so the augmented reality will show the person what to do to pour the water into the cup, and then the person in real life can see, they have like the ability to see through the goggles, and they can pour their water. So another type of virtual reality, which I use a lot of, is called non-immersive. So in this case, you don't have that same sense of immersion. There's a little less potential for cyber sickness or simulator sickness, where you might get a little too kind of immersed in the situation and then have difficulty with maybe feeling faint or nauseous. So this is non-immersive. Basically, you're looking at a large screen in front of you, usually a large television. And these are often used for games, physical games. So we call it exergaming, is another common term, kind of a European term that I like to use because kind of VR, people think of the goggles, so non-immersive VR I often call exergaming. So some examples, the person in the middle with the harness is doing a game where I think they're doing some sort of soccer or football game, and in a rehab setting, and they're harnessed again to prevent against falls. They can really challenge themselves without any danger or risk of falling. The person on the left is doing something called mode view. So this, I don't know if they have that at Pearly or not, but it's a motivational video that is shown to motivate somebody to exercise, particularly to bicycle. So the woman has a TheraTrainer, which is a type of bike that can assist her to pedal, Or as she becomes more familiar with it, it can actually, you can put some resistance on it, and then you can get a nice workout out of it. And she's watching a video of looks like some street somewhere. There are thousands of these videos, and the videos are taken from the perspective of a cyclist, so they're very slow. You see the people walking by, and you can go visit virtually many places in the world, in Europe and Canada and different places. And you can also hear like the ambient sounds of the video, or you can hear some music or something. So this is meant to motivate people to exercise, particularly people living in long-term care or doing rehab. It's been really successful. They even have something called Road Worlds for Seniors, where there's like a competition in September, I think it is, of people doing this MotiView over a period of a month. And the people in Ottawa have been very successful in winning some of the categories in this Road Worlds for Seniors. On the right is somebody doing WeFit. So WeFit was really popular pre-pandemic, particularly in long-term care. And this person's doing bowling. So you hold on to a controller and you use it to interact with a exergaming platform. There's also a little tablet or little platform you can stand on, but this is really popular for people in long-term care and retirement homes to do some exercise. So, given that background, I'm going to go over some of the projects that I've been working on. First, about non-immersive VR, and then two different areas of immersive VR. So first, to talk about non-immersive VR for stroke and mild cognitive impairment, which is MCI. I'll get to the MCI later. So this is the first bit is about stroke. I'm kind of like going way back here. So Dan McEwen, who I believe worked at Pearly for a little bit, he did a project back in early 2010s, like maybe 2013 or something, 12, 13. And he wanted to use non-immersive VR to see if it could benefit people in their balance and mobility for people who are recovering from a stroke, who are in inpatient therapy here at Briere. So he did a project using this system called IREX, so Interactive Rehabilitation and Exercise System, made by Gesture Tech. And you can see in the picture, the woman is kind of batting away as a goalie for a soccer game. So she's kind of batting away the ball. This system, so the picture on the top I put in there, this system used a green screen. So you stood in front of the green screen, and then the virtual image was superimposed upon that green screen, and you looked at it from a television across the room. So it's a little bit of a different system. It's older, not as portable or as maybe useful in different situations. But Dan did find that this system, I think people did about 10 or 12 sessions of about 20 minutes each. And there were clinically significant changes in people's walking and their balance after doing these sessions. And that's in addition to their regular inpatient rehab therapy. However, a lot of people couldn't stand well enough to do this trial because people in inpatient rehab were often spend a lot of time seated, and it wouldn't be safe for them or able for them to spend 20 or 30 minutes doing standing exercise. So when I came to Briere, I started by doing a sitting balance project. So kind of replicating what Dan had done, but doing sitting balance exercise using a different VR training platform called Gentronics. And it was also inpatient stroke. And we added this to their regular therapy. So we didn't change any of the regular therapy people had. And we had 76 patient participants. We randomized them to a control group or an intervention group. The intervention group, they did the Gentronics exercise, I'll explain in a second, to challenge sitting balance, and they did it with no hindrance to their balance. So all the exercises were meant to encourage reaching and leaning, They had no seatbelt on. I was sitting right beside them the whole time for safety. They could reach and lean as much as possible. The people in the control group also did exercise, so that they would be in active control, but they were not able to challenge their balance. So the games chosen only used their arm and not their trunk, and they were strapped into their wheelchair with straps across the chest. The games, you can see on the screen, the gentleman in the top is doing a game where you reach up, grab a seed, you reach down to the ground and plant it. A tomato grows, you have to reach up again and put the tomato in the box. The one on the bottom is a little bit of a different game. It requires a lot of visual, spatial, and cognitive work. And I don't know if you can really appreciate, but there's cutlery. And so you pick the cutlery off of the shelf and off of the counter and you put it in the drawer. So again, reaching and leaning to be able to reach those. So in the end, we did not find a big difference between the two groups in their sitting balance. And we think it's partly because of the outcomes we used maybe weren't the most appropriate, but also these people are also being engaged in their full-on rehab program. So the addition of the sitting balance wasn't as much of a benefit. But we had, this was very feasible. The patients really enjoyed it. The therapist found that, patients would comment on how it was capturing them. It was engaging them. So next we did a study with the outpatients and we taught them how to use this gin tonic system. So this was really interesting. 2 occupational therapy students did this project and they taught 2 OTs, 2 PTs who worked in outpatient therapy to use gin tonics. And they had them use it for about a year, and then they assessed their use of it over time. So this example is really interesting. So this is the therapist using gin tonics with a patient participant. He's doing a soccer game, so he's kicking the ball into the net. And as he's doing that, she is working with him to make sure that his weight transfer is appropriate, that he spends time on his more affected stroke leg so that he can balance well while he kicks. She's making sure that the tone in his arm doesn't increase so that he's relaxed in his upper body and that he's not like compensating by using different movements. So she's using this as part of her therapy. But you can also use it in other ways. You could create a program and then provide that to maybe a rehabilitation assistant, and they could go and do the program with their patient while the therapist is maybe with another patient. And you can also get the patient to do it on their own at home. So there's lots of different ways of using the system. Interestingly, the gin tonics is still being used in OT and PT, inpatient and outpatient to this day, mostly an outpatient, also an inpatient. And that's like, so we did these projects in 2014 to 2018. So they're still being used. So these are some comments from the patients and therapists while we were doing this project. So can I use this with my other patients who aren't in the study? So one of the therapists was particularly interested to use it for several people with other patients. Can I continue to use this with my patients after the 4 sessions of the study are done? So again, speaking to the fact that they thought this was helpful. All the activities are good for movement, and you don't always do that in therapy. So that was one patient's comment. Another patient said, we are able to check our speed of recovery, and the challenge makes it more interesting to do so. It's like playing a game, so it's fun, and at the same time, it works. And finally, another therapist comment was, I still have difficulty with the internet and the login. I'm not really good with technology, so I need more guidance with all of this. So there was certainly a learning curve as the therapist got used to it. The little graph on the left, the details of it aren't important, but basically we asked the therapist a bunch of questions in different categories about their comfort, how they thought VR was compatible with their work, if they found any barriers to using VR, if they expected to use it in the future, if they thought it was useful, if they thought it was easy to use. So we asked them before they had the training and used it with some patients, and those are the blue bars, and we asked them again at the end. So this is just one therapist, but you can see how the comfort, the intent to use, the compatibility with their practice increased over time. So all the red bars are all a lot higher than the blue. So that project was successful, and at the same time, we thought that we could try this same here. Actually, I just wanted to this same work at different locations. So we kind of like got a proof of principle that the Gentronics VR would work here. So we did a cross-country study, and we recruited 5 different places to do the same training to use VR in the therapist practice. So we used occupational therapists, physiotherapists, rehabilitation assistants. We had people using it for inpatient, for outpatient. We had large rehab centers. We had community hospitals with rehab floors. We had rehab that was stroke-based. We had rehab where stroke was one of many different neuro conditions that they treated. We had a community-based for private clinic. We had semi-rural and urban. So we had a large variety of situations, and we did this project in Timmins, in Ottawa, in Fredericton, Moncton, and Vancouver. And I'll just present a few of the different facilitators and barriers that came out of this project. So the therapists were trained, and then they used the system for about a year, and we requested that they use it on at least 3 patients, at least 3 times, and then they would do those same questionnaires regarding their comfort, etc. We ended up with a lot of the therapists really enjoyed it. One of the barriers was the cost of obtaining the equipment and maintaining the license for the VR. So one place ended up purchasing the equipment at the end off of us, and other ones were trying to find some funding to do so later. So the facilitators that came out of this project was the patient's enjoyment, enthusiasm, interest, and motivation. So the patients like really liked it. They thought it was helpful. They thought it was beneficial to their recovery. They were able to coordinate between staff. So some of them would create like a schedule so that they had to share the equipment. Having appropriate patients. So one thing in particular that this Gentronics system doesn't do much for the hand. It's okay with the arm, but if you want small, fine motor control, it doesn't do that so much. So having appropriate patients was important. The support from the administration was really important. So if they could find a place to put it and supported the therapist in getting the training and encouraging them to use it, that was really useful. Having the knowledge and ability to use it quickly without a lot of setup time, that was really important, and that's where the training came in. And if they were noticing improvements with their patients, then that was a benefit and a facilitator to their ongoing use. Some of the barriers were kind of the flip side. So scheduling, trying to share, especially if it was between floors. We had one situation where the OT and the physio gyms were on different floors, and that was a bit of a barrier going up and down the elevator with the equipment. The cost was a barrier, especially of the license, as well as the TV and computer. The population wasn't always suitable. The amount of time for setting it up could be a barrier if you weren't already familiar. The lack of the fine upper extremity motor skills, which I mentioned. Lack of research on individual games. So sometimes the game selection specific to a patient goal was a bit difficult. The inability to continue at home. So patients would really enjoy it, and then they would say, can I continue doing this at home? And at this time, the answer was no. So that was a problem. And also space. You need a couple of meters between the person doing the VR and the TV. And sometimes in a crowded physiotherapy gym or OT gym, there just wasn't enough space. So given the success of these projects, we thought, let's try it at home. So there's actually a version of the Gentronics where you can create kind of a program that the patient participant can't change. It's kind of like a plug and play, you press go, and it just goes through a bunch of preset exercises. So you can have exercises like sit to stand or arm circles or stand on one leg, different things like that, but also the games as well. So this gentleman's playing a game. This is my favorite game, where you your body movements move a ball down a track. And then to make it more difficult, they take some of the walls off the track, and then you have to move your body down the track without losing the ball. So we did this home-based, non-immersive virtual reality training after discharge from inpatient or outpatient stroke. We did this in their homes. So this was a randomized controlled trial, and it's a feasibility trial. So we wanted to see if it would work. Oops, sorry, I went backwards. So we ended up with 20 participants. 11 were in the VR group, and they did virtual reality for balance and gait and function. The control group did iPad apps, and they were intended for fine motor skills and cognitive improvement. And our outcomes were for walking and balance. So we didn't expect the iPad to influence those. So we asked people to do 5 days a week of 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week for 6 weeks. And we tracked their usage of the iPad or the Gentronics. First of all, we went into their homes and installed them, did some training to the participant and their caregiver or their care partner, their study partner. And then we let them go. We checked in weekly and monitored their use. And then we could change the apps or the Gentronics VR according to how well they were learning, if they needed more challenge, less challenge, if they were having difficulty. So at the end, we had 11 people in the VR group and 9 people in the tablet group. And as you can see on these little graphs, the top 2 graphs are the number of sessions. We asked them to do 30. And each of bar is a different participant, and the line is 30. So you can see that it was a little bit variable for the VR. It was a big ask. 30 sessions was quite a few. 5 days a week is quite a bit. Some went more than 30, some went less. For the iPad, most people went 30 or more. And then the bottom 2 graphs are the average number of minutes per session. We asked for 30, and you can see people were fairly close to 30 on the left, which were the VR, and on the black bars, people on the iPads actually did more than 30 minutes. That's probably because we made a 30-minute program for the VR, and iPads, they could just kind of do how much they wanted. Other parts of this project, people really enjoyed it. There were some who found it boring after a while. Some found it challenging at first, and then it got easier. We were able to change the challenge. It fit in everybody's home. Everybody was able to learn, barring one person who had a motivational complication of their stroke, and despite their support from their family, they didn't do many sessions. There was while it fit in everybody's home, some homes had a problem with that 2 meters of unobstructed space. So there was a bit of a challenge sometimes with the camera seeing the entire person. It was safe. There were no falls, no injuries. And people really liked it a lot. Many people wished to continue with the VR after they were finishing the program, and found that it helped. When we tested their balance and their mobility, there was an improvement in both groups, but not a difference between the groups. And we think that's probably because these people are still recovering from their stroke. They're still in the early phase of recovery. And we're expecting both groups to improve, and it wasn't enough in this protocol for people to improve more with the VR. But that wasn't really our intent of this project. We had small numbers. It was mostly to see if it would work, if people could learn, it would fit in their house, etc. So this worked really well. So we ended up doing the same project, but for people with mild cognitive impairment. This time it was just 11 people, no control group. The background is that people with mild cognitive impairment are at risk for having the cognitive impairment get worse, and also they're at risk for functional impairment, which is like difficulty with walking and balance. And there's some research to show that doing cognitive exercise as well as physical exercise at the same time can be beneficial. So a lot of the Gentronics exercises or the games, they have a cognitive component. So there may be a sequencing component. There are some actual specific games for cognition. And some of them have this visual spatial component, like the one where you put the cutlery in the drawer. So we did this project. We recruited 11 people. And the outcomes we were looking at were similar to the stroke one. Could people learn? Were they able to set it up in their home? Did they like it? Did they think it was useful? Did they actually do it? So so in the end, people enjoyed it. Some thought it was useful, some not. We had a pretty varied group of people, and the people who found it more useful and enjoyed it tended to be those with a lower level of physical functioning to begin with. We did have some people with a really high level of physical functioning who walked or jogged several kilometers a day. Those people found it less useful. Some people found it helpful from a cognitive point of view. They thought it challenged their memory or their thinking, others not so much. So the interest was a little more variable than for the stroke rehab, but it was safe. There were no falls. Many people would be interested to continue. It did fit in people's homes. Sometimes we had to put it in their basement or their bedroom, like different places, but we could fit it in. We had one gentleman in particular who his wife would mentioned at the end that before the study, he did a lot of napping. He was in his easy chair much of the day. And after the study, he was more alert, and he had regained his interest in playing his guitar and with his amps and creating music. So that was a nice outcome for that person. And another person regained enough kind of physical activity, mobility, endurance that now they could walk their dog, which they hadn't been able to, and even walk to the mall for a haircut. So some good outcomes too. So I'm going to switch now to immersive virtual reality. So I have two projects where we're using immersive VR. So the first one is using immersive VR to relieve pain in complex care. And we finished this project just recently. We used immersive VR experiences can decrease pain and distress in patients living in complex care. So people in complex care typically have multi-morbidity, like 8 or more multi-morbidity. And they're often, this is often resulting from like a catastrophic event or a very serious injury. So these people are spending, maybe living or spending many months or years in living in complex care. So in Ottawa, that's at St. Vincent Hospital. And they often have pain of different types, often pain from like chronic pain from different reasons. And some people have pain when they're having different procedures. So position changes would be one, but another one would be wound dressing changes. So we want to focus on two groups of people, one with wound dressing changes and one with chronic pain. So we recruited these two groups. We only ended up recruiting 3 people who had wound dressing changes. And one of the reasons was it was really difficult to coordinate the use of VR with the nursing care and the actual wound dressing change. So that was one lesson to learn. And then we had, I believe, 17 people who had chronic pain. For all of these people, we introduced them to immersive virtual reality using the goggles. We had a selection of experiences that were very passive. So no games, no use of controllers. A lot of these people can't use their arms or not for that purpose. We had a large variety. So everything from meditation, walking on the beach, nature documentary, travel, experiences like rock climbing, music, culture, just watching movies, a lot of options for people. And we offered them 3 times a week for 3 weeks. We did some outcomes before and after, basically asking about 3 parts of pain. So the intensity of their pain, the time spent thinking about pain, and the unpleasantness of their pain. So, and we also asked about their mood and their quality of life. We asked the mood and quality, or the quality of life, like before and after the 3 weeks. The other things we asked before, during, and after the VR experience. So on the top graph here, this is for those 3 patients who were having wound dressing changes. The slope of the line will tell you if the person had less pain with VR versus without VR, or more pain. So you can see that 2 of the 3 people experienced a decline in the pain they experienced when using the VR compared without VR. Most people loved it. They were really engaged. They found the immersion very complete. There were a few comments on the weight of the headset, or that it was itchy, or would cause some discomfort, or it would slip. So the researcher always had to stay with them. So it was a little bit time consuming that way. But it was easy. Once we got it all set up, we didn't interfere with the wound dressing changes at all, and it worked really well. It was just this coordination between nursing, like when the wound care was actually going to take place. That was the biggest challenge. For the 17 people with chronic pain, their pain intensity, their pain unpleasantness, the time spent thinking about pain decreased significantly before to during the virtual reality sessions, and then before to after the VR sessions. It was for many, it was a dramatic decrease in pain. We did not see changes in mood over the VR, and we did not see changes in mood or quality of life over the 3 weeks, which was a little expected, because it was only, most people had only about 3 sessions of about 20-25 minutes within those 3 weeks. A lot of people, because they're so complex, they would, it wouldn't always be a good time for them to have the VR. But it was, people loved it. I think I have some comments here. It was like being there. I was totally immersed. I'm not aware of the pain at all. And this is one of the chronic pain participants. Felt extremely calm after the session, as though her mood shifted and she was somewhere else for a bit. This is a person talking about themselves. I was not even focusing on my pain at all. And when you were inside the world, you could really immerse yourself in what you're seeing. And that's one of the wound dressing participants, A1. So finally, the last project I want to talk about is the creation of an immersive virtual reality companion for people living with dementia. So one problem is that people living with dementia, particularly people in long-term care, despite their communal living situation, often are lonely and feel isolated. the staff are typically amazing, but they don't have time to spend one-on-one for hours at a time while a particular resident, tells their stories over and over and over again. So with my two colleagues, Dr. Andrew Frank and Dr. Stéphane Bouchard, we've created a compassionate AI-powered companion to encourage reminiscence. So this is Kira. So Kira is accessed through, again, an immersive virtual reality headset, and she is a companion to, and her presence is meant to provide enjoyment and encourage reminiscence. So Kira, when you put the VR on, you see her, she introduces herself, and then she is programmed to ask questions of the user to get them to reminisce about pleasant and happy times in their life. She's very specific about concentrating on happy and pleasant times. She's very emotionally intelligent, actually, and will steer the conversation away from topics that are distressing. And she'll follow up with other questions meant to delve deeper into some topics. And we've had people talk about the time they lived at the farm when they were a child. And I remember the family member of that person was like, wow, he hasn't talked about the farm, in years. We had people talking about their grandchildren and the activities they enjoyed doing together. People have talked with Kira for up to 52 minutes. And we're working more on this project to developing better, as AI improves, of developing better programs so that we can have a more conversational, smooth experience. We've used this program with about 20 people living in long-term care. And one thing we did learn is that of the group of people living with dementia, some are more verbal and more able to chit-chat and to talk, and those people do better chatting with Kira. People who more mumble or aren't able to speak in sentences aren't as appropriate for this. So of the objectives that we set out to do, hopefully you now know a little bit more about the different forms of VR. You can understand how VR can impact the lives of people living in the community, patients in hospital, and residents of long-term care. And now for yourself, you can consider how using VR could be used in your situation. So just thanking some of the people who have funded all these different research projects. And I thank you all for listening. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. And my contact information is at the bottom if anybody wishes to contact me later.
Thank you so much. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to post it in the Q&A box, and we'll take it from there. So there's a question about the access to presentation letter. Yes, for sure you'll get it.
I'm sorry, say that again?
No, there was a question about access to this presentation later. So I said, yeah, they will be able to get it once the recording is up on the website.
Yeah.
In the meantime, when others are posing questions, I can go ahead. I have some interesting questions. Okay. So what are some of the challenges that you, based on your experience, that people have, like, or like researchers like you have, in terms of like the immersive versus augmented versus non-immersive? Like, what are some of the challenges, and then what are some of the ways to tackle those challenges in sort of using these like virtual reality forms with our residents or with our older adults?
So partly it's access to equipment and cost. So the non-immersive VR platforms, I kind of present the one that we use for a lot of our research, but there's lots of others out there. They tend to use just like a TV. You can use some of the newer ones just use a webcam and a laptop. So they're more accessible from an equipment point of view. You don't have to own the goggles. And so that's one thing. the immersion created by the goggles is special. There is research on the importance of the immersion in creating the experience. So that is one benefit to using the goggles. The goggles are still kind of heavy. The MetaQuest 2, which was really common a few years ago and is still common, a lot of long-term care facilities have it. A lot of we have it here at Briere in different parts of our organization. As that one ages out, I'm unsure whether they will be replaced. There is a third version now. It's even a tad bit heavier. So the weight can be a problem, especially with older adults or people with different medical conditions, because they have to, be able to support it on their neck and their head. With the VR for Pain program, the virtual reality is meant to be used sitting up, because there's like gyroscopes inside. So if you look up in your immersion world. So you look up, so you can see the sky or the ceiling. If you look down, you see the ground or the floor. So it's a challenge to use with people who are in different positions. So when you're having a wound dressing change, you might be side lying, or people in complex care might be like reclined or slouched, or lying down. So we had to work really hard to find experiences that would allow them to actually see not just the ceiling. And we had to kind of set up the experiences so that the person could access them without using the controllers, because a lot of people in complex care can't use their arms in that way. So we would have to stand very close to them and create a boundary, and then we would have to make sure we do all the like enter and the select before we put the headset on. So these are things that the makers of the hardware and software should consider when they're looking at accessibility and the use of their products.
Thank you. We have some questions right now ready with us. Okay, so the first question is about Kiera. So is Kiera something that maybe eventually be available to the public?
I hope so. So yeah, we've spun off a little business to market Kira. We're not quite there yet, but if you look up Ngram Innovations, then we have a little website, and as stuff comes up, you can have a look. I think here, and Ngram's up at the top here. That's how it's called.
Okay, so next question is, will the time come that Kiera could be on their TV set so that they are not wearing a VR device?
Good question. So we have actually, we're actually testing Kira right now, not with the VR, just to make it easier and more accessible to people who don't have the equipment or are uncomfortable with the headset. So the goal is to have Kira available perhaps in VR, but also on tablets and phones.
Perfect. Next question. Okay. Thanks. How do you respond to the comment that VR costs a lot as a barrier given the many benefits you share?
So there are different price points for VR. I would think that the MetaQuest we were using is kind of middle of the road. I can't remember how much they would cost, but a few $100s. There are really simple ones where you put your phone in it, and use your phone as to create the VR, and they're very inexpensive. Like $100, less than $100. And then there's other ones that are much more pricey. So there's a lot of different price points. So I guess it's up to the individual and their abilities, whether VR is worth the cost, and what benefits would allow them to want to spend the money on that.
Okay. So next question, are the AI modules used currently offered to all stroke or other currently at stroke rehab stroke rehab centers in Ottawa or other sites in Ontario or Canada?
So the non-immersive VR that I was presenting, it is used here at Briere in inpatient and outpatient stroke. I am not sure at this time where else it's being used. It was being used by home and community care in Eastern Ontario, but that was a few years ago, and I'm not sure what the status of that is. And I'm not, yeah, I'm not really sure.
Okay. Last question. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation. Did you test VR with caregivers or people living with dementia?
We tested VR for the Cura project with people living with dementia. We started testing with people with mild to moderate dementia, and we found people with moderate dementia sometimes weren't able to be verbal enough and to speak and tell their stories enough. So the second cohort of 10 people, we pivoted a little bit, and we were working with people with mild cognitive impairment and mild dementia. We have not tried it on caregivers, but we have had caregivers present and give their input when we've tried it.
Okay, perfect. I think, yeah, pretty much we have covered all the questions that were posed. Because we have one more minute, I think I'll use this time to get one more insight. So, as we know that older adults often have sensory loss, hearing and vision loss. So, how do you see we are playing some role there, and then what could happen down the line?
Yes, so that is an important issue when you're doing anything like with, you know, visual or auditory stimuli. So with the immersive VR, one disadvantage is that you're supposed to be able to wear glasses or eyewear underneath the headset, but if you've got a wider face or larger glasses, it doesn't always fit so well. So that's a problem, because when you take off your glasses, then things are kind of fuzzy. So it is an issue for some people. With the hearing, the microphones are really close to the ear, so that's helpful, and it is compatible with a hearing aid. For some people, just the visuals enough. So say if you're doing an immersive VR experience and you want to do a meditation or a walk on the beach, or then you may not need to hear a lot. Or on the other hand, if you're doing a guided meditation with a lot of, verbal guidance, you may not need to see well. And you can use closed captioning if you're not able to hear. So there's some workarounds with the Gentronics. They had a lot of green, and apparently green is difficult to see for some people as they age.
Mhm.
So they actually changed up the colors, and you can turn it to black and white. So some adaptations.
Great. It's good that there's something is going on. Okay. Yeah, sure. So I think with this, I'd like to close this session. I would like to extend a sincere thanks to our presenter, Dr. Lisa Sheehy, for this fabulous presentation. And thank you all who attended today's webinar. We hope you enjoyed it. Please stay tuned for more information on our upcoming webinar in September. In meantime, if you would like to learn more about Center of Excellence, our current projects, or have ideas for upcoming webinars, please reach out. Visit our website at www.pearlyhealth.ca/Center of Excellence. Just as a small reminder, we will really appreciate if you could complete the short survey when you exit the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good
Have a
summer.
great day.